Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you once again for joining us.
Afternoon, Alicia.
Look, what is the latest from the Zim blast? We know that the police earlier had a media briefing. What came out of that?
Yes, indeed. Head of security, particularly the police, this morning, they had a media briefing where they were giving an indication in terms of the investigation. Not much has come out, but only a request to all the Zimbabweans to come forward with information, people who can assist in the investigation, and a reward is being proposed, but we don't know the amount yet. Secondly, they've indicated that 8 people have been injured, but last night the health minister gave a number to 41.
All right, and the president is fine?
The president is fine. You saw him speaking to the national broadcaster in Zimbabwe last night, giving an indication and his views, and also sharing some light about what has transpired, but also giving an indication that many things have been happening behind the scenes, the attempts and the threats against all those who broke ranks with President Mugabe, and he looks like he's not surprised.
So if he says this is actually the 6th attempt on his life.
Yes, that's what he kind of pronounced last night.
But even the opposition leader, Chamisa, they said there has been several attempts on his life as well. So it seems like it's an ongoing thing with our political tensions in that country, that this is what happens.
Yes, the problem is when you have infighting in political parties, you have these kind of situations. I mean, you know very well that even though MDC is a opposition party, currently there are factions. You can't rule out the internal conflict, but also you know that previously MDC and ZANU-PF had serious tension, and you can't rule out the perhaps some of the people who are aggrieved, who don't like MDC, or it's an internal conflict.
You know, Sophie, when we spoke yesterday, you mentioned something very interesting, and I failed to follow up on that. You said that before this blast happened, there were reports that apparently Grace Mugabe had been speaking and she was booed. Does this have anything to do with the aggrieved people coming with these solutions?
No, Grace Mugabe. It was about Grace Mugabe visiting this area some few months ago, last year in fact, just before Mnangagwa was recalled. You recall that after Grace Mugabe was booed in Bulawayo last year, it was a Saturday. On a Monday, that's when Mnangagwa was fired. So it was last year. I was just making a comparison that that area you've had in that region, not in the same area, you've had Grace Mugabe being booed. Secondly, in that same region, not necessarily the same stadium, Mnangagwa, the issue of poisoning came up last year. So I was saying in that Bulawayo area or region, you've had all these incidents, and now yesterday.
So there's no Mugabe suspect that is in the fray at this stage?
Well, you know very well that politicians, they always like to point fingers at each other or to others. And of course, in the analysis, some are likely to question those who are supporting former President Robert Mugabe. I spoke to a person who's very close to former President Robert Mugabe on Friday, incidentally, last night, on Friday night, because I wanted to find out where is President Mugabe, former President Mugabe, after it transpired that he is not in the country. I was told that he's in Singapore for a routine medical checkup. But I have since learned that he left much earlier, before the nominations were concluded, because he didn't want to sign a nomination form. So you see, politics are still playing itself, you know, in terms of the former president of that country and the former leader of ZANU-PF.
Very much what we're seeing here, Sophie. But let's talk about South Africa now. We hear that there's been a serious reaction from South Africa. Tell us, I mean, we do know that Zimbabwe is a very close neighbor. Tell us about some of those political party reactions.
Well, the EFF last night, a strong statement condemning the incident. And then this morning, the African National Congress, the ANC, saying this cannot be allowed in the region. And of course, on Twitter, Emmerson Mnangagwa also condemn the incident. And of course, you had a few minutes ago the president addressing the conference in Limpopo, going at length to try and condemn the incident, not only in Zimbabwe but also in Ethiopia, and also giving an indication that our foreign policy is anchored around Africa first, of course the region, and then Africa and the world, and therefore sending a message that South Africa will continue to pursue for peace and stability in the region and on the continent, and that will extend globally. A strong message there. He even gave an indication where South Africa's position is at the moment on the free trade agreement, saying next week at the AU summit in Mauritania, we are going to finalize the issue of the free trade as a country.
Interesting news there. All right, and while we're still on this, yesterday we also spoke about the blast that took place in the Horn of African Nation in Addis Ababa. Any updates on that? I know that the AU has come out in saying something. What did they say?
Yes, the AU chairperson, Commission Chair, has issued a strong statement. Secondly, a policeman was arrested and some people were arrested, but we'll get a proper update from our correspondent in Ethiopia later today. But President Ramaphosa also saying this afternoon or later today he is going to call the Prime Minister of Ethiopia to convey his message and his message to the people of that country in terms of South Africa's position that they condemn the incident. But secondly, South Africa will continue to assist the continent in ensuring that there's peace and stability on the continent in general.
All right, Sophie, before I let you go, just how serious is this issue looking at the continent in broad?
Well, as the people on this continent, we must be worried that you have these kinds of incidents, because when you want development and prosperity, you must have a stable continent. We cannot have a situation where there is instability or pockets of conflicts in different regions. Therefore, as a continent, we must be worried, and I think all the leaders must work together to find a solution, because you know very well that one of the main objectives of the AU Commission is to ensure that we silence the guns in 2020. Is this going to happen?
And Sophie, I mean, speaking of solutions, who's then supposed to monitor these political tensions and make sure in the different countries across the continent, and make sure that it doesn't come to blows like we saw yesterday?
Well, in terms of countries themselves, they do have security clusters, and those security clusters must be up to the task, the intelligence services. Secondly, the region, we have in the SADC region a troika organ on politics and defense. We must be able to assist those countries that are experiencing these conflicts.
Types of conflict,
And at the continental level, we also have a structure that deals with peace and security. And therefore, at the global level, at the United Nations, we have the Security Council that is supposed to assist. Therefore, it's a collective effort to ensure that there's peace and stability around the world. It starts in countries, regions, continent, and of course globally.
Absolutely. Sophie, thank you so much for that sound update. That was SABC News foreign editor Sophie Mokoena in studio with us, giving us a sound update on the blast that took place yesterday in both Ethiopia and Zimbabwe.